Good morning, everybody. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining the Utility Summit today. I'm going to turn this over to Todd Ravis from our IT side of the world to give a little insight about the Zoom.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I wanted to run through some quick instructions on how we will handle today's virtual summit. If you choose the text option on the live polling, you will get a confirmation text back stating that you've joined Beverly Swiger's session with DelDOT in parentheses. From there, you simply reply to that text with your answer each time a new question is asked. Please do not answer poll questions using the Q&A function. We will be taking typed questions using that though. So to use Q&A, look for the button at the bottom of your screen if you have a question for us. You can also view live captioning by clicking the associated button at the bottom of your screen for that as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Eric, and confirm that we are recording. Thank you.
All right, again, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2022 Utility Summit. Thank you all for attending. At this point, I'm going to turn everything over to our Cabinet Secretary, Nicole Majeski, to give a few opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Eric. And thank you all for being with us today for our 7th annual DelDOT Utility Summit. I do first want to start off by thanking the entire DelDOT team that made all of this possible, for putting together today's agenda and for continuing to create these virtual platforms for us so that we can still hold these important sessions, even though we can't be in person just yet. So I have a long list of people to thank, so please bear with me. So of course, Eric, Simo and his team from the utility section, Debbie, Chuck, James, Becky, Barb, and Monroe. From our engineering support section, John, Danny, and Bob. And from tech and innovation, again, for creating this virtual platform for us, Todd, Omar, Ron, John H, John G, Mike, and Kevin, and then Chris Owens, who I'm not sure is here today, but created the fun virtual backgrounds for everybody, for the presenters. So again, takes a lot of effort to pull this together, especially when we're in this virtual environment. So a huge thank you to the team. So we started the Utility Summit, as I said, 7 years ago, as an attempt to really strengthen our partnership with the utility companies to improve our coordination and our communication with you all. And this partnership that we have has never been more important than it is today. Between the new bipartisan infrastructure bill that Congress has passed and what we were already planning on investing on the capital side, we are going to have the largest capital program in the state's history. Over the next 6 years, we're going to be spending over $4.5 billion in capital infrastructure improvements. That equates to over a $600 million capital program each year. I remember when I started at DelDOT 10 years ago, we were, hopeful to get maybe a $200 million program or, around that range. And so the fact that we are now going to be doing $600 million each year is just, it's phenomenal and it's exciting. But these partnerships that we have with the utility companies, with the contracting community, with the municipalities, with our consultants, these partnerships are so vital. As you all know, I don't think that there is a project that we do that doesn't impact utilities in some way. And so making sure that we have the coordination with you all, the improved communication is key to our success. And so we are excited about today because we're going to get to talk about some lessons learned. We're going to talk about some coordination efforts that we're doing, but then also get to hear from you and your feedback, because we're really looking for, any and all ideas on how we can, be innovative and improve our overall performance and success. So with the new infrastructure bill and the investments that we're making on the capital side, what you're going to see from us from a DOT standpoint is our continued investment in safety, especially given the number of roadway fatalities that we have been seeing. As you all know, last year was one of the deadliest years that we've had on our roads. We had 139 fatalities, which is the most that we've had in the last 15 years. Already so far, and we're not even 2 months into the year, and we've already seen a continued spike in fatalities. And unfortunately, a significant number of those fatalities are happening to those that are under the age of 18. And so it is going to take everyone's part to improve safety. And so you're going to be hearing that message from us every single time that you see one of us out there speaking to the public is our emphasis on safety. We're also going to see a renewed focus on resiliency and sustainability of our infrastructure with the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. As Delaware is one of the lowest lying states in the nation, we are going to have a renewed effort with our new section of transportation resiliency and sustainability led by Jim Pappas and Stephanie Johnson, taking a hard look at our current infrastructure and what are the things that we can be doing to make it more resilient. And then as we're looking at projects in the future, what are some things that we can do to, again, make them more sustainable going forward? We're also going to see a renewed emphasis on the electrification of our infrastructure and our fleet. Jim's going to be presenting on that today, especially with the electric vehicle charging stations, which is going to, utilities are going to play a huge role in our success of implementing that new program. You're going to see projects that are connecting communities and that, that are really, for so long, we've been kind of focused on the big projects, and the big projects are still necessary, but we're also going to have a renewed focus on some of the smaller, more local projects that are going to be connecting people to vital resources that they need in their everyday lives. And then ensuring that we do have equity in transportation, whether that is through our DBE community, our minority and women-owned businesses, through the diversity of our transportation our employees that work here at the DOT, and then again, making sure that we have transportation facilities and resources and services that are equitable for everyone throughout the state. So you're going to hear a lot about this throughout the day. As I mentioned at the start, our team has worked really hard to put together a great agenda for you all that we hope that will be informative. And also a little entertaining. For those of you that were with us last week at the winter workshop, I do like to kind of throw the challenge out there that, we'll try to entertain you as well, especially on those, all important manual updates. I don't believe that there is a manual update that's happening today, but I have been promised by Dan Thompson that he is going to entertain you all as he's giving his MOT presentation. So not sure if it will be through interpretive dance or song, or maybe in an accent. I'm not really sure. I'm very excited to see what he's got in store for us. So again, just thank you all for being here with us today. We can't emphasize enough the importance of the partnership that we have with utility companies, because as I mentioned, your success is our success. And so the more we can work together, the better. And so thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn it back over to Eric.
Thank you, Nicole. All right, so now I'm gonna move into a recap from last year and provide some updates as well. So we like to start all of our presentations with our mission statement: excellence in transportation, every trip, every mode, every dollar, every one. So some quick poll questions here. Did you enjoy the 2021 Utility Summit? And again, the instructions for this are at the top of the poll here. You can go to pollev.com/DelDOT or text DelDOT to the number 22333. All right, lots of people that didn't attend last year. All right, next one. Did I wear a mask during one of my presentations last year? So the answer there is yes. Totally forgot that I was wearing a mask and wore it through the whole presentation. So that was fun. Anybody want to estimate how many total attendees we had at last year's summit? Awesome. Thank you all for participating. All right. So obviously last year's summit was held virtually. Our attendance was 217 people. So some folks were close. We went through a program forecast and policy update. So we provided a general overview of our 2021 program at that point. We had a great presentation about work between DelDOT, Delmarva Gas, and City of Wilmington on 95 and 10th Street. We went through some lessons learned. So we touched on maintenance and highway projects and had project-specific presentations about our Claymont Regional Transportation Project and the Elkton Road Project. Then South District went over Public Works top 4 issues from 2020. So I do want to touch on some updates. So I'll hit on these items as we move along. For the utility manual, there are some high-level topics that we need to discuss further. So we're going to take that to the Utility Coordination Council, which you'll hear more about shortly. And then depending on how those conversations go will depend on trying to get the manual updated and out for review with internal and external stakeholders. Another thing, just to bring everybody into the loop on that we've done over the past year is we've instituted blanket vertical adjustment agreements. We have created a policy here at DelDOT, which allows us to perform at-grade vertical adjustments of certain utilities at DelDOT's cost. It's a much more efficient process. So, of course, it is at DelDOT's discretion. So we have put it in place with Delmarva Gas, Verizon, Artesian, Tidewater, Suez, Newcastle, Kent, Sussex, and Wilmington. We either have them in place or we are working on them. So those are some of the companies this work impacts the most. But these agreements allow us to move forward under the blanket as opposed to doing project-specific agreements if the work falls into that classification. So from an agreement standpoint, it's more efficient. And from a DelDOT highway contract standpoint, it becomes more efficient since the highway contractor can perform the work without needing to coordinate additional parties to come in and perform work. Another thing we've put emphasis on over the past year and utility companies will continue to hear a lot about is cost estimates. I've provided information here on requirements from FHWA. So everything we do needs to meet FHWA's requirements. So information related to cost estimates can be found at their program guide on utility relocation and accommodation on federal aid highway projects. So again, the link is here. These presentations will be posted, so everybody will have access to the links. So this FHWA document is based on the federal code, the Code of Federal Regulations. So in particular, utility agreements are outlined under 23 CFR 645.113. That does include information about cost estimates. And then specifically utility cost development and reimbursement requirements are set at 23 CFR 645.117. So we are working to make sure cost estimates we receive from utility companies are in compliance with these requirements. So again, folks will continue to hear emphasis on this. I did include a snapshot here just to show the information that should be included with cost estimates. And I highlighted that estimates should include sufficient detail to provide the state and the FHWA with a reasonable basis for analysis. So again, this should echo what I've been telling folks through the monthly meetings and through the individual project coordination. This snapshot does come directly from that program guide. And then additionally, another snapshot just providing more information related to cost estimates. And just to reemphasize, estimates need to provide enough detail for DelDOT to verify the costs. I've shown some snapshot of different examples for how we can break out the costs to provide that detail. But unit costs and quantities need to be included, and that information needs to match whatever has been coordinated for the project. Another item that we've been putting more emphasis on the past year, really probably the past 2 years, is trying to improve our utility schedules. So we're having a lot of coordination in sharing what we call utility bar charts, also called utility relocation schedules. So what we're trying to do with these is incorporate the highway project schedule and the utility relocation schedule, whether advanced or concurrent, so that we have a good projection for our highway contractor. This is a requirement from the Federal Highway Administration, as mentioned previously. So we need to make sure that we're providing a good level of detail here, and it needs to be broken out by duration, or by activities. So it needs to include activities and durations, along with when in the sequence of construction the work is going to happen. So next poll question: which broadband providers are on the call today? Verizon, Comcast, Mediacom, Atlantic Broadband. If you guys could please provide insight there. Skynet. All right, thank you. So broadband. FHWA has put a rule in place called the Broadband Infrastructure Deployment Final Rule. Again, 23 CFR 645. It was published December 3rd, 21. The link is provided here. Again, folks will have access to this link once our presentations are posted. But the point is to facilitate the installation of broadband infrastructure throughout the country. And what this rule does is it requires states meet specific registration, notification, and coordination requirements to allow broadband to move forward. The main points is for DelDOT, we need to identify a broadband utility coordinator. We need to create a registration process for entities that want to be included in coordination. And we need to establish a process to notify broadband entities at least annually of our STIP. And then we also need to coordinate initiatives with other entities that include state and local land use and transportation, along with the broadband companies. So we're actively working to meet these requirements. Our goal is to create a web page with an online registration system. Once we get this stood up, we will be reaching out to the broadband entities that we have in our database already to try to get this rolling, and then the information will live through the web page so that we can make the necessary notifications. The deadline, FHWA's deadline for us to have this up and running is March 3rd. So we are hoping to have something out and be up and running prior to that date. All right, more questions. Where can information be found regarding DelDOT policy behind blanket vertical adjustment agreements? This is the test, if folks were paying attention or not. All right, looks like the majority have it. That's DelDOT Design Guidance Memorandum, which is DGM 3-1. Next one, where should I go to find more information related to utility cost estimate requirements? The DelDOT Utility Manual, FHWA's Program Guide, or DelDOT's website? All right, so the best answer here is B, but it's a bit of a trick question because you can find some information related to it in our utility manual, and you can get to our utility manual from DelDOT's website. So it's a bit of a trick question. That's all I have for you for this one. I appreciate it. Next, we're going to turn it over to Jim Pappas to talk about the Eevee infrastructure.
So I think I'm actually going to go next. You had me confused, Eric.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shantae. I was looking at the wrong part of my agenda.
It's okay. Danny was on point. Danny, if you could just bring up my slides.
Sorry, I screwed Danny up too. I apologize.
It's okay. We're just entertaining everybody as the secretary requested. So I'm Shantae Hastings, Deputy Secretary and Chief Engineer for DelDOT, and I'm excited to give you an overview of a brief overview of the infrastructure funding that Secretary Majewski mentioned, as well as the Utility Coordination Council. So as Eric mentioned, we start all of our presentations, so you may hear our mission statement quite a bit today. To provide excellence in transportation for every trip, every mode, every dollar, and every one. And this mission statement is really important to us because it was developed by our employees, and we strive to make all that we do really relate to it. So, fun question. What do the Ouija board and the movie My Girl have in common? So yes, they are two things that I guess, experienced during my teenage years. When you think about the Ouija board, it can be one of those kind of spooky things. I always thought it was very fake. And then the movie My Girl was one of my favorites. And this little screenshot is from when Veda was singing about her crush on her teacher whose name was Bill. So this all ties together, I promise. So when I first saw the acronym for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, AKA IIJA, IIJA, or what I like to call it was EJA, it totally reminded me of a Ouija board, frankly, just because of the acronym there. And then you've got, once it was signed into law, it was then called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, AKA Bill. So hopefully you got my little connection there. But seriously, you know, we are in love with Bill because it finally gave us 5 years of certainty in terms of funding. And so both EJA and Bill are the same thing, so sometimes you'll hear them interchanged. But I'm going to give you a quick overview of Bill. So our infrastructure funding that we are going to receive on the highway side is about $480 million over the 5 years. So that's a significant increase over what we had been receiving. And then on the transit side of things, it's about just under $57 million, again, over those 5 years, so a 25% increase. So a lot of funding, and so here's how it's broken down. We've got some new programs, and then we've got some increases to existing programs. So on the new side of things, you heard the Secretary talk about resiliency and sustainability. So you've got EV charging under that for a little under $18 million for the 5 years. You've got the Protect program, which is also resiliency and sustainability focused at a little under $49 million for the 5 years. We have the carbon reduction program at a little over $27 million. We've got a significant increase into bridge funding, $225 million over the 5 years, or $45 million each year. And then lastly, our kind of standard formula funding that we receive every year has been bumped up to $160 million for those 5 years. And so on the EV side of things, we're going to be looking to strategically deploy EV charging infrastructure and to really have an interconnected network. With the Protect funding, we'll be planning for resiliency improvements, evacuation routes, and at-risk coastal infrastructure. On the carbon reduction side of things, looking for any types of projects or programs that reduce transportation emissions or any other carbon reduction strategies. Bridges, as you all may know, we have some of the best bridges in the country. So we are at under 2% of our bridges being in poor condition. So we're in really great shape. And part of that is because we have put some other federal funding and state funding towards that over the years. And now we have this dedicated source of funding for the next 5 years. So we're really excited to use that to just continue to preserve, maintain, rehabilitate, and reconstruct our bridges. And then on the formula side of things, you heard the Secretary talk about safety improvements, obviously improving congestion or reducing congestion, I should say, making those connections within communities, you name it, all of those kind of standard standalone projects that we do. So on the FTA side of things, again, a little under 57 million over the 5 years. So we've got our Wilmington DTC maintenance building that will be done. We've got some technology enhancements as well as microtransit expansion that we're looking to do. And then really continuing to increase our zero emission fleet and infrastructure. So why are the budget and the Utilities Coordination Council linked together? As the Secretary mentioned, it's very important for us to collaborate really well together. And we are charged with delivering this new, larger program. And so we've got to find ways to be innovative and creative and communicate effectively so that we can deliver all of those projects that really improve transportation throughout the state. So back in 2019, Senate Concurrent Resolution 48 was created, and it established a Utilities Coordination Working Group. That working group met over the course of 2019 and 2020 and made some final recommendations. And one of those recommendations was to create a Utilities Coordination Council that would be in code and exist forever. So Senate Bill 152 was signed into law by the governor in September of last year. It created that Utilities Coordination Council, established 13 members to be on the council. They're to meet quarterly, basically. They elect a chair and a vice chair every 2 years. And annually, they report on their activities to both the governor and the General Assembly. So the duties of the council are really to figure out what are those best practices to shorten the total time to coordinate and implement those utility relocations that we have as done as part of many of our projects, to look at if there are needed agreements, regulations, or even legislation that needs to be implemented to help hold the department as well as utility companies accountable. And also the Coordination Council can be used to resolve issues on specific projects. So if there are some coordination issues or delays, they can be brought up to the council. So the council is comprised, again, of 13 members. We have 2 legislators. We have our Secretary Majeski, Eric Simo as our utilities engineer, and we have representation from several different utility companies, as well as some of the utility organizations, and then last but not least, ACEC from the consulting side of things. So the Coordination Council did meet in January. Secretary Majeski was elected as the chair, and Garth Jones from Chesapeake Utilities was elected as the vice chair. The Coordination Council also has 2 subcommittees, a design as well as construction. So Alan Martini from Century is leading up the design subcommittee, and then Eric Simo is heading up the construction subcommittee. And I mention these because if you're interested in participating, please reach out to either of them. We'd love to have as much participation as possible. Again, we need to collaborate and have creative ideas in working together, and so really the more the merrier. So as I mentioned, the Coordination Council will be meeting quarterly. We've established the meeting dates for the remainder of this year. So April, July, and October, all of the meetings are at 10 a.m. and we're hoping to be able to be in person, but there will likely be a virtual option as well. So the working group that started working back in 2019 and 2020, they made 16 different design recommendations, 8 construction recommendations. There were also 3 technology recommendations. And then the department, kind of outside of that process, also submitted another 9 recommendations. So we have a good starting point in terms of the Utility Coordination Council and being able to kind of vet some of those recommendations and move them forward. And the goal is really within this calendar year of 2022 to really make some good progress so that we can have a good report to the Governor and General Assembly. And again, if we need any changes to our regulations, changes to code, that we can make that happen. Because again, at the end of the day, we're trying to ensure that our projects and the utility coordination are moving together seamlessly and between the department, the utility companies, and the contractor, that we're really working collaboratively together to be able to deliver our program. So with that, I'm done. It's been great being with all of you today, and I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Thank you, Shante. So just as a reminder for everybody, if there are questions, please put those in the Q&A. And then if we have time, we'll answer them live. Otherwise, we may be responding just through a typed response. So please, if there's questions, go ahead and utilize that Q&A function. And with that, it really is Jim Pappas's turn this time. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim Pappas to talk about the EV infrastructure.
All right, thanks, Eric. You scared me about 10 minutes ago. I wasn't quite prepared. So, okay, now I think I am. So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Eric, for the opportunity to kind of give a quick update. You heard the Secretary and Shante both mention some of the new funding and the new programs that are going to be available to the department. So we wanted to share this information with our utility partners so that you're aware of this, because especially with the EV infrastructure that we need to build out, we're going to need significant assistance from the utility companies as we move forward. So this is going to be a kind of a quick overview of the legislation and what some of the requirements are in the plan. At the end, my contact information is there, and we'd love to sit down and have a further conversation. So I'm the director of the new Transportation Resilience and Sustainability Division. This was a group that was just created last spring. So if you were in last year's utility workshop, and like, I'd never heard of that because we hadn't been born yet. So now we're here, and it's perfect timing with the funding that's going to be coming available. So Danny, I don't see my arrow, so I can't move forward. There we go. Thank you. All right. So as Shante just mentioned, the bill and the IIJA are kind of the genesis for this. The goal for this particular program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, is by 2030 to have 500,000 new EV charging stations installed nationally. So that's the goal from the president. Our kind of homework that we in the state of Delaware and DelDOT have to do is by August 1st of this year, so here in a couple months, we have to have a plan of how are we going to implement this program in the state of Delaware. Now, we started working on this in the fall, knowing that this was coming. We didn't have specific details or things like that, but we had already started engagement with DENREC, OMB, and we've brought on AECOM consulting firm to assist us with a plan development for the state of Delaware, and then ultimately what we are going to be submitting to the federal highways. The federal government actually created a new joint office of energy and transportation that's going to kind of be administering this program. So that's our target date is by August 1st, we have to have that plan provided to them. And we don't envision any problem meeting that. And the state of Delaware here in fiscal year 22, we're looking at $2.6 million. Shante mentioned in her presentation that over the 5 years of the IIJA and the BIL, we're looking at upwards of potentially $18 million, but 2.6 is what we're going to be getting this year. Again, I mentioned the 500,000. So why are we doing this? And why is the federal government? So we're looking at the equitable adoption of EVs, and especially for those that cannot charge at home. Some EV charging does happen at home, but we also want to look at communities and kind of local areas where we can add EV chargers. And I'm going to show you a map here in a few minutes of where we currently have chargers, and kind of you'll be able to kind of visually see where we have some islands, if you will, of areas that we need to add those. Obviously, everything that we're doing and that the federal government is doing is associated with lowering the emissions. If you haven't seen that chart, when they talk about greenhouse gas emissions, the transportation industry is anywhere between like 28 and 35%, depending on which chart you look at. But the bottom line is transportation is a significant challenge associated with greenhouse gas emissions. So by moving to electric vehicles, the idea is that we will be able to lower the emissions across the nation. And also this legislation wants to basically make the U.S. a leader in the electrification effort. In total, there's $7.5 billion that's going to be available. This is nationally. $5 billion of that is what's called formula funding, meaning states get that automatically. And then $2.5 billion is going to be in what's called discretionary grants. And those discretionary grants are competitive grant applications that, Delaware and Wyoming and then, California, we would competitively go after those funding opportunities. But again, we have money that is automatically coming, that $2.6 million. We get that, through the non-competitive formula funding, but we certainly want to go after grants as well. So with that $2.5 billion in the discretionary, there are two programs that the legislation specifically referenced. One is called the Corridor Charging Grant Program, and one is the Community Charging Grant Program. They don't have all the details yet on that, so we're looking forward to more information to come out from that. But one of the things that we do know is there's a term that you're going to hear is called the alternative fuel corridors. Those are locations across the country that have already been kind of targeted and identified as kind of roadways that states want to have large percentages of alternative fuel vehicles. And these could be not only, this presentation specifically about electric vehicles, but other alternative energies, potentially hydrogen, propane, things like that, being deployed along those corridors. So again, I mentioned these alternative fuel corridors. There's also the kind of the interconnectivity of the information. One of the data gatherings that we want to get out of all these this infrastructure that we're going to be building with these EVs is, what is the usage of them? We're already tracking that to some extent with the information that we have with the EV chargers that we have already, but it's kind of be a much more robust program where we can look at, the usage of those and kind of project out, because the big part of this is, we referenced that there's 500,000 chargers by 2030, but then we want to, from a national standpoint, continue to grow that as well. And then the thing is, once these alternative fuel corridors are kind of built out, then we and other states can kind of go to the community level, if you will, and add additional chargers there. And you may be familiar, here in Delaware, we have added charging stations whenever we've had the opportunity, when we're building buildings. So for example, up in Bear, where there's a new facility being built for Canal District, they have 4 charging stations there. 2 are going to be for state fleet vehicles, but 2 of them are going to be public facing. So for example, if you had an electric vehicle and you had a meeting in that office, you'd be able to go in there and plug in for the hour or 2 or whatever you're in your meeting. And so that's going to kind of be the model moving forward. Park and rides, we have several of those as well, but this legislation is going to encourage that continued use in publicly accessible locations. So I mentioned the alternative fuel corridor. So this is where we are right now here in Delaware. So you'll notice there's 2 different terms. There's called EV pending and EV ready. EV ready means we already meet the criteria under the legislation. And the legislation is within every 50 miles, there needs to be a charging station there. So the EV ready already have those. The EV pending means we need to populate or add a few more stations along there to meet that criteria. So you'll notice that the majority of them are north-south. So we have, I-95, obviously, Route 1, Route 13, and 113. And we actually had a meeting yesterday with DENREC, and we're going to look to add some east-west corridors potentially as well. The first one that came up was 404, for example, in Sussex County. If you're at all familiar with Delaware, you understand that a lot of people come to Delaware beaches from the west, DC, Baltimore, Northern Virginia, and they come across, most of them come across 404. And ironically, we actually had a conversation with somebody a couple months ago that had come to visit family in Lewis and made reference that there were no charging stations along their route until they got to Lewis. So we're going to look to probably add some additional ones. And there are some specifics here, and this is, and again, happy to have this conversation offline, but within the information that we have is there are some specifics on the capabilities of the equipment. So the EV charging stations have to have at least 4 150 kW DC fast chargers. So basically every infrastructure that we build, those are some of the minimum requirements that have to be there. So this is what we felt was the perfect opportunity to let our utility partners know that. And again, so that you can kind of start thinking. And again, we'd love to have some offline conversations about this. This is a map that kind of shows you a snapshot in time of where the charging stations are across the state. So that previous one was just the DC, the high speed, more powerful chargers. This is kind of a map of all of them across the state. And, there are more and more of these being added by, not only states, but the state, but also private entities. So this is kind of, it's a static shot. This was from a couple months ago. So there may be some more, but it does kind of give you an idea of where we are. And I do want to say is, again, we are looking at this information. We're developing a plan for the state. And the idea is that we're going to be able to look at these, maps like this, find out where there are some holes, if you will, and look at some strategic locations where we can add additional chargers. The secretary started the conversation for today's workshop talking about equity. So this is, again, something that's very important to the department in all of our project planning, design, and implementation. It is for the EV infrastructure as well. So the general idea, and I think you can kind of understand this, is we want to improve and encourage clean transportation. There are so many benefits associated with that clean transportation, being, the greenhouse gas emissions, that, reducing those, like we mentioned, and also just making cleaner air for the communities. We want our children and ourselves to be able to go out there and, on a nice sunny spring day, to go out there and play sports or just run around, ride their bicycles. And we obviously want to make sure that the air that they're breathing is as clean as possible. So, using these EVs and placing these charging stations in locations, strategic locations, are ways that we feel that we can improve that. So there are a lot of considerations that we have to take into play as we are developing this plan. Again, a lot of this is repetitive that I've already mentioned, and I'm assuming this information, and I'm happy to provide this slide deck if you want to reach out to me on a sidebar to go over this, because this is just kind of a high level things that we want to talk about. But again, a lot of this information that we need is in partnership with our utility companies as we move forward. I will mention here this middle bullet there talks about solar arrays and energy storage. Again, that's something that a lot of states that are maybe a little bit further ahead with their electric vehicle implementation, they're looking at alternative energy as a way to store the energy and also recharge their facilities and their equipment. So again, that's something that we're looking forward to working with partners as we go forward. Again, it was specifically referenced in legislation to work with your local utility operators. And again, appreciate this opportunity to sit with this group and let you know kind of where we are, where we want to go, and literally how we need your help to get there. So just real quick, again, I mentioned that our division was just recently created last spring. We do have a website with some information that we're continually populating. This is kind of a one-pager of things that we're doing. So we're not only working on EVs, we're also looking at the physical infrastructure of the state. As the Secretary mentioned, we are the lowest lying state, and we need to look at how can we build our infrastructure and maintain our infrastructure to ensure the opportunities that transportation provides to people. So that's just kind of a one-pager that's within our webpage. One other thing I'll reference down here at the bottom is you may be familiar. In the fall of last year, the governor rolled out the state's climate action plan. And so this is across the entire state, all agencies. DENREC was the lead in that, but there's a lot of really good information in there. There's talk in there about electric vehicles as well. So good source of information for you. And this is my contact information. Again, happy to have any further conversation, sidebar conversation, share this slide deck, or have continual conversations. So with that, Eric, I'll turn it back to you. And again, appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Jim. We do have a couple questions, if you wouldn't mind. The first question: are funds available to the utility companies to upgrade their facilities to serve the EV stations?
So that's a very good question. And I mentioned that we had a call yesterday with DENREC. Part of that was kind of a list of questions that we need to generate so that we can reach out to federal highways and get some clear answers. So good question. Unfortunately, I can't answer it right now, but again, feel free to reach out and we can have that conversation.
Okay, and then one more question. Are the EV infrastructure site locations available on DelDOT's website, or perhaps available through an app so transportation users can view in real time?
Yeah, so I will admit I do not have an electric vehicle, but my understanding is there are multiple apps that are out there through I'll say the private vendors that have their charging stations. But yes, as I had that slide of kind of the map. That is actually through DENREC that had all those green dots. That was actually a DENREC site. And yes, as we're continuing to populate or adding more in the state, we have intentions of adding that to our DelDOT site as well. So thank you.
Very good. That is all the questions we have at this point, Jim. So if you have a chance to hang on, if you see any more, if you wouldn't mind answering those, sure. I appreciate it. All right. So the next presentation is going to be our program forecast from Mark Lutz.
All right, thanks, Eric. Can you hear me? Always making sure. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
All right, great. And thanks for having me again. Just seeing if I can get myself rolling here. There we go. You have seen this already, so I'm not going to reiterate our mission statement. And so this, I think probably our former chief engineer, Rob McCleary, I don't know if he gave this presentation at every utility summit, but before I started presenting at this, he was giving similar presentations. So giving an update on various corridors, our more important corridors throughout the state, and the projects we have going on, a lot of the projects that are specific related to the overall program that Shantae was talking about. And so not obviously can only hit a high level overview in a presentation like this, not getting into the weeds and certainly not hitting every project. And if you want to know more information about almost any of our capital projects, please go to this website, deldot.gov/projects. And for me, the easiest thing is you just type in the name of the project right in that search bar there, and you get more information on that project. We work really hard to keep this website up to date. And this is, again, a great place to find information on the scope, the location, and the schedule for projects. So with that, I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to cover by county, so starting on the north end of the state. And in today's presentation, I'm going to focus mostly on design projects, where really a lot of that utility coordination is going on. Obviously, during construction, that's very important as well. So probably touch on really design and construction the most, not really talk a whole lot about projects that are farther out in the program that maybe we're either just starting design or they're starting design in a couple of years. And for most of the projects that are either nearly complete or completed, I'm obviously going to skip by those. But here's our biggest active project is the I-95 Rehabilitation project, also known as Restore the Corridor. And that project, from a public impact standpoint, I would say it's roughly halfway done. So we had our major traffic switch in December. So now all the traffic is on the northbound lanes, and a good amount of the southbound lanes are closed for that reconstruction. The other, just a side note here, if you have not driven through that, or whether you have or not, Note that we have our automated speed enforcement was activated in January. So going back to our safety theme that both Nicole and Shantae hit on, that we were seeing some really high speeds and high crash rates. So we had legislative approval to implement automated speed enforcement, which is up and running in that work zone. So something that impacts the utility company projects as well as DelDOT projects is for knowing that that I-95 corridor was going to have a major traffic impacts in the region. We implemented a kind of a zone, and within that zone, that gray area, the different types of roads, we were having a higher level of approval for lane closures for whatever work, whether it was a DelDOT project, a utility project, or a developer project. So this was the original zone that we used, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but when we saw the project actually up and running, the impacts are not quite as severe as we thought. So we were able to reduce that zone, and now this is the current area and roadways that are kind of getting that extra level of scrutiny for traffic impacts. And I wanted to show you the way that changed, for one thing, compared to what I presented last year, and also lining us up for one of our other projects that I'll show you in a minute or two. All right, so getting into the corridors themselves. So starting with I-95, and again, not really going to talk anymore about the Restore the Corridor project, but some of the big ones we have in design, and one I think many of you are very familiar with, probably our next biggest project coming shortly is the number 15 on this slide, I-95 and 896, which design is well along. That is one of our projects that we are doing as a CMGC. So we've been coordinating with Wagman as the contractor and our design team, and of course with utility companies and right away and environmental and all the fun things that we do to get these designs done. So the hope is to have, we have an advanced project that, well, we've had a few advanced projects, but one more on southbound 95 should be kicking into gear shortly, and the main project we expect to have in construction later this year. The other four green dots kind of right in the middle of the screen, 6, 7, 9, and 10, we're coordinating all of those projects for a few years out from now. Well, number 9 is a DRBA project, a redecking of the northbound Delaware Memorial Bridge. They plan to begin that this fall. And then we have several projects right there in and near the 141, 295, 95 interchange. We just started design last year on improvements to the ramps from 95 northbound going towards 295 and towards New Jersey. And that project we hope to have in construction in late 2024. If all goes well, there's some deck work at location 10 there on 95 in the Churchman's Marsh area that if we're hoping to squeeze that in ahead of time, hopefully in early 2024. And then there's also additional bridge work right on the curve there, kind of in the middle of the 295 interchange. That's all 6, 7, and 9, or 6, 7, and 10. We're trying to coordinate all those closely in the 2024 to 2025 timeframe. See if there's anything else hot in this area. I think that covers 95. So back to talking about for the Restore the Corridor project, we're also setting up a similar kind of a zone of added approval needed for lane closures surrounding the I-95, 896 interchange project. So this zone is shown here. We're still working out the details. And again, this will be any project that's going to require lane closures on certain roads, within this zone are going to have an extra layer of approval, trying to make sure that whenever we have, this project's different, obviously, than the Restore the Corridor project, but we are going to have a fair number of ramp closures. Some of them will be short-term, some will be longer term. And, this area kind of really covers all the detour routes of those closures. So So we just want to carefully coordinate and do as best as possible and not impacting the public worse than necessary. So stay tuned. There'll be more specific guidance on this will be coming out over the next, probably over the next month or two. Ooh. All right, Route 1. We have some big projects going on Route 1, but really 2, 3, and 6, they're all combined in one environmental document. At this time, there will likely be breakout projects as we get start to move into more detailed design and get towards construction. And then number 7 at Tiebouts there, that's also in the environmental stage. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these projects. They are again, they're a little bit early, not deep into the utility and design work yet. All right, the 141 corridor. So obviously talked about the one. Well, I didn't talk about, but the 141 job is mostly done. So that is, there's still some punch list work to do, and there's still some work and lane closures, but by the spring, we'll have everything totally wrapped up on that 141 job. Really along the corridor itself, nothing else particularly hot for right now. There are a couple other things in this area that I want to point out. They're not shown specifically called out, but they are in this map area. So the bridge at 1-684 is on South Heald Street on Route 13 going up into the city there. That is a bridge project that's another one that we're doing CMGC. So we recently brought our contractor on to continue the design efforts there. So that job will have a lot of utility work involved. And then also the Route 13 pedestrian improvements. We've been working on pedestrian improvements on the Route 13 corridor for several years. Many smaller projects have been implemented already: roadway lighting, implementation of crosswalks, parts of a bus lane in the northbound direction. And now we have two big pieces of that left over. Oh, and then a lot of sidewalk has been installed through the paving job that wrapped up last year. So we have a median barrier project that we expect to have in construction by the end of this year, and also an additional sidewalk project that should be in construction in 2023. So the median barrier project's the hottest one on that project for now. We hope we have some leeway in how we design the median barrier, and the goal is going to be to avoid utilities wherever possible. But we expect that there will be some utility relocations needed as part of that project. And so we hear it a lot about 141. So we're almost there. We're almost there. But these are the favorite, my favorite memes that I've seen on the 141 job. So the cicada one was I think that was the best one that I saw. So no, almost done on 141. All right, 273 corridor. Some of these are the construction's wrapping up on Airport, Appleby, and 273. Construction's going full speed ahead on the 95, 273 ramps and the Chapman Bridge. And we should be sending out the bid shortly over the next over the next month or next couple months. This spring, we should have the Chapman Road intersection. So that'll go out to bid. So that'll be in construction by the fall. Now, a hot corridor particularly from a utility standpoint in Newcastle County is Route 40. So we have of course, most, if not all of your companies were involved in the advanced utility work for the Route 72 widening job, and that advanced work is completed, and we'll be sending that the DelDOT side, the DelDOT contractor side should be going out to bid over the next couple months. and then we can, get that road widening implemented. The Route 40 at 896 is another grade separated intersection project there, and that's another one that's going to have some big operational and safety improvements once completed. Likely we'll have advanced utility work on that job. So construction for that one is expected in 2024. And then a little bit ahead of that is the Route 40 widening job from Salem Church Road to Walther Road. That one is, again, another hot one with lots of utility relocations, and that we are hoping to get into construction in 2023. All right, and then we have the 299 corridor. That is in construction, of course, and again, so that's one where there's certainly there was advanced, but also concurrent utility relocations going on that project. So that one is cranking along in construction, and there's a couple other projects in the area, but nothing particularly hot. But we are working, restarting the design on Laurelwood Grove Road, a bit north of here, and also Boyd's Corner Road. Those are projects that'll be in construction in the mid 2020s to mid to late 2020s. All right, moving on to Kent County. All right, and we definitely talked about this, the Route 13 in the Dover to south of Camden area last year. Over the next few years, this is going to be a hotbed for construction and transportation improvements between the Route 13 widening projects and the Camden Bypass projects, and also the Walnut Shade Road project. So say late last year, we did do some shuffling of schedules and rescheduling a bit. So now the Camden Bypass projects and Walnut Shade Road, they're both scheduled to start construction in 2023. Whereas the number one on the screen, the northern section of the Route 13 widening, that's now pushed out to plan to start in 2024. And the lower section, the southern section of the Route 13 widening, is now scheduled to start in 2026. So a little bit of shuffling around there based on a few things, but a lot of right-of-way acquisition needed on some of these projects. And that ties in, of course, with the ability for advanced utilities. So had to reschedule those a bit. So that's our current schedule on the 13 and the various Camden area projects. All right, the Route 8 corridor, we have two that are close to construction. Number 5 there is Route 8 and Route 15. That is out to bid right now. So there's been, again, a good amount of advanced utility work going on that job. And it's, again, out to bid for a contractor right now. And then number 3 on the screen, Kenton Road. We are, as part of the larger corridor project, we're doing a breakout advanced project at the lower southern end of that project at the intersection with Green Tree. And so we hope to have that out in construction in the fall. For the main project, that project the design is expected to be complete on that project by the end of the year. And based on our old funding plan, we weren't going to have funding for that until the out years, 2027 or 2028. The hope is, as we finalize our updated financial plan, taking into account the new federal infrastructure bill, the hope is that we can advance the schedule for the rest of that Kenton Road project. So stay tuned for more information on that. And then there's a few other projects in this area, a couple intersection projects that are circled, in the northwest side of Dover that are starting design now, as well as number 4 College Road and number 6 the Route 8 connector. Those are starting up shortly. I think we added this one. I don't think we had this one last year. A lot of projects kind of in the south of Dover and Camden and north of Milford, center of the state area. So a lot of new work kicking in here, some in design. All these are pretty early in design: Peachtree, Irish Hill, and Canterbury or Andrews Lake. So all these are pretty early in design, or we haven't even started on them yet. The green, the blue ones haven't even started on yet. So, but a fair amount of work in this area. On this screen, the one that is farthest along and ready to go to construction, hopefully this fall, is down in Milford, the 113 and 14 intersection. All right, and then this is kind of the segue slide of Route 1, obviously the northern end in Kent County and the southern end in Sussex County. So the really not the most of the work currently in the CTP in Kent County is complete. All the new grade separated intersections like Frederica, North and South, and Little Heaven and Thompsonville. So all those are complete. Then, so that really, again, kind of switching into Sussex County, the hot area of Route 1 is really between 16 and 5 Points. So the Route 16 grade separated intersection is going out for bids early this year. Advanced utility relocations have been underway, and so we hope to start construction on the main project in later in the summer. Then we have Minus Conway, number 12, and Cave Neck, number 11. Both of those are deep into design. The alternatives have been selected. We've had lots of public outreach. So those are cranking ahead. Both of them are hot for in the utility area, lots of utility relocations that, again, need to be coordinated. So those are, let's see, Minus is scheduled to go to construction in 2023 or possibly early 2024. And Cave Neck, right in that same, maybe more like 2025 for Cave Neck. So, but going hard and fast on the design and coordination and all the other things that go into these projects. Another interesting project off of Route 1, but shown there, circled there, kind of to the left of number 12, is a intersection project at Cave Neck, Hudson, and Sweetbriar. We've had some public outreach, so we should have our preferred alternative at that intersection shortly. That's just a bit of an interesting project because we weren't supposed to start on that one for several more years, but we have an agreement with Sussex County that basically they front us the money to let us get started on that earlier. So that's that intersection project there. All right, and now continuing with Sussex County, we have our 113 corridor. Of course, deep into design here is the 404 grade separated intersection at the north end of Georgetown. We're also working on the 16 GSI up in Ellendale, and of course the North Millsboro bypass in Millsboro. So all those are kind of going full bore and all going, well, particularly the 404 GSI hope to be in construction in 2024, and North Millsboro we hope to be in construction in 2023 and completed in 2025. So that's the goal with that one. We have one new project on this corridor that's starting in design later this year, and that's number 8, 113 and US Route 9. So that starts on design later this year. And then there's several other ones that are proposed to be added to our CTP, but we won't be starting design on those for several more years. All right, our Route 9 corridor. It's kind of I would say it's coincidentally, we kind of started in the middle. So the intersection projects in the middle are complete and we're kind of working our way out. So the Georgetown East project number 3, that's nearly complete, should be wrapped up this spring with final paving. And then we got a victory here. We were able to add a right turn lane on Minus Conaway at Route 9 through a paving project. So we were really able to advance that due to its relatively small scope and minimal impacts. We were able to advance that much quicker than what was originally anticipated. So, so those two, or the one is essentially done and the other's almost done. And then the Park Avenue project. So phase 1 is bids are in review for that. So we should start construction in the spring or early summer on Park Avenue phase 1, and then phase 2, still working on design there, but expect to be in construction in 2023. Then over in the Lewis area, we have several projects deep into design, which again, I think you're all probably familiar with. The northern section of Plantation Road, that's another one that's gonna go out to construction shortly. Find my notes. I lost my notes on that one, but anyway, I think I'm going to talk more about Plantation on the next slide. And then of course, a lot of work, utility work needed for the Old Orchard West Coast intersection number 10 there. So that one is in the right-of-way process now, and we're hoping that the advanced utility work for that job can be going full bore in 2023. And so that the road project can start in 2024. Then a couple new projects, the Route 9 project, which from Old Vine Road to Route 1 and Kings Highway. So that's number 9 and 11. Those are both very early in the design stages. And one more that's not shown here, but again, those of you that are in the middle of it are I'm sure pretty aware of Bridge 3-714 on New Road. So that's right there near that number 10 as well. That's kind of bigger than a typical bridge project where we're raising the road there a bit to try to alleviate some flooding concerns. Ties in with the resiliency topic that Jim and Shantae and Nicole were hitting on earlier. So, and then the other one not listed here. So obviously looking at these bigger corridors, we're mostly talking about safety projects, asset management projects. I'm not really touching on some of the multimodal projects, the trails and the sidewalks. We have a lot of those going on as well. Some of them we can have minimal impacts, and other ones, as you know, they have impacts, whether it's right away, environmental, or utilities, or to the public. But a really nice project we have on this screen that I don't have called out is the Georgetown to Lewis Trail. That's been built in pieces over the years, and there's another piece that was just wrapping up now, and another one going into construction shortly. And then I believe there's about 6 miles left, and we're hoping to get going on the design of those last 6 miles so that we would then have a trail all the way from Georgetown to Lewis opened up in the next few years. All right, and depending on your perspective, saving the best for last. The Route 24 corridor. A lot of work going on there, either in construction already or about to be in construction shortly. So on the eastern end there, the widening from Mulberry Knoll to Route 1 is mostly wrapped up. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, we do have the Plantation Road project kind of spurring off, or between Route 9 and Route 24. The northern section of that, now that I have my notes in front of me, we expect to PS&E that shortly, so that'll be in construction later this year, the northern section of Plantation Road. The southern section, we're going to be kind of regrouping on the southern section based on some other analysis in the area of other roads that are part of the Transportation Improvement District. So probably starting design on this, or restarting design on the southern section of Plantation Road later this year. Then we have 2, 3, 4, and 5, all shown as green right now. And within the next few months, they'll switch to orange on this chart as they will all be in construction. So 24 Love Creek to Mulberry Knoll. We have the advanced duck bank work, hopefully getting implemented there within the next few weeks or within the next month, and actual PS&E on the job shortly. So construction starting in the summer. Then we have Camp Arrowhead, Angola. That's another one. It's going to be out to bids in March. Again, starting up construction probably in the summer or the fall. So that's number 3 and number 4 on the chart there. And then we also have Burton's Pond. That's a dam project there. Number 5, that one we expect to be in construction later this summer as well. And of course, Long Neck, number 6, and Bay Farm, Mount Joy, number 7. Long Neck's been in construction since last year, and Bay Farm should be starting up construction shortly. I think we have a contractor on. So by the summer, everything from number 2 through 7, if it's going to feel like one long construction zone on Route 24. So we hope we trying to give as much information to the public using smart work zone technologies, et cetera, to try to minimize the pain and hopefully get these projects implemented and get out of there in the next year or so, and then hopefully that corridor is in good shape for some time to come. So with that, I obviously ripped through that very quickly. Hopefully, again, all of you, whether you're on the design side at DelDOT or one of our consultants or one of the utility companies, hopefully you're well familiar with these projects anyway, given all the coordination that our design teams and our utility groups are doing. And so that is all I have.
Thank you, Mark. We do not have any questions at this time. So if you're going to be on for a little bit, if you can just take a look if any questions come in and respond to those, appreciate it.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, so next we're going to move into the reminders and lessons learned, and Debbie Kukulich and Steve Wright are going to be presenting at different points in that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Debbie.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with the lessons learned and reminders. Oops, sorry about that. So today we're going to go over the process that DelDOT has in design. You'll see concepts or surveys, preliminary designs, the semifinals, and the finals. Recently, step back into the preliminaries. Recently, the bridge section started skipping the preliminaries, and then they decide to insert what is called the conceptual plans. Basically, it's the preliminaries, and that's how we're treating it in the UPA. So it's kind of the same, but you may or may not always get it. So I'm going to take and go through these steps each step of the way. First, we're going to start with the concept plans. This is the first time everyone gets to see the project. So it's considered the investigative phase. Here we gather the information from the utility companies and determine if designation is needed. Also, this is a good time for the utility companies to see if they have any internal facilities planned for upgrades, relocations, old mains, or electric, whatever, that may be incorporated into the project. Most importantly, we need to know if the utility company has any facilities that cannot be easily relocated or an outage can't be provided. These are things we need to know early on. The preliminary phase is the first look at the design of the project. At one point, someone mentioned that it was a good time to see where the poles are going to be going, but that's not really true. We need everyone's information, whether it's due to conflicts, upgrades, or not relocating, the utility companies still need to respond. And no, resending your as-built is not a true submission. We understand that we may not have enough design details for the utility companies to know what the conflicts are early on. And most of us do not want to redesign a project more than we have to, but there are reasons why acquiring this information is crucial, one step at a time. Without the utility company's proposed alignments early on, we are unable to design around or make sure there's enough room for everyone within the footprint of the project. We need early insight on the project's impact so that we can plan for the right-of-way and the PE needs. We need the utilities to tell us about their right-of-way needs and to incorporate where we can and coordinate where we can place your facilities. Did you know that it can take up to a year for us to acquire the right-of-way and PEs? It really does. So we have to understand the parameters of the project, then we can prepare for what the utility issues we may have. By providing us the information along with your easements, it helps us determine the path forward. It gives DelDOT an idea of additional cost up for the project. If a utility company wants to upgrade their current system or install new facilities, now is the time to start incorporating these facilities into the project. It's easy to put this phase aside, but in a way, it's the most important to understand the impacts of a proposed design would have on the utilities and timing. An example would be if a transmission gas line had to be relocated, its construction could take longer than the project. Just something to consider. Another thing to consider is when a utility really can't relocate or an outage can't be taken. Again, this gives us time to consider other designs. Again, we need to know this early on so that it can be considered as part of the design. Depending on the project scope, utility relocation complexity, continued coordination is needed in between phases to refine the location alignment. Therefore, we can do more upfront planning if we receive the utilities design now, but we need all of you to provide us with your information. Semifinals. Semifinals is when we get everything together and we start looking at the project as a whole. This is the first time you're actually seeing the project. And so there's a whole lot of coordination. This is where you see the drainage information. You see the alignments of the utilities as we've received them in from the preliminaries to see where the conflicts are, where everybody needs to go. We also are confirming what our right-of-way needs are so that we can finalize our right-of-way plans. Any proposed new utilities or upgrades that gets put in the plans. If you decide you're aerial, but nope, I'd rather go underground, again, we need to know that now. Borrow estimates, MOT discussions happen, relocation schedules. We confirm any restraints like outages or times of year for outages, construction schedules. And the big question is, when can you start? The list goes on, but this is the time we iron out everything and the utility companies that submits their final construction packages. At this stage, the utility section should be able to finalize the utility statement, prepare the NTPs, and get ready for the construction to start. Of course, this doesn't always happen, but that is the goal. Final plans. We arrive at the final plan stage. Now is the time to verify the location design based on the final plans. Utilities should have their in-house construction drawings completed prior to the final plans to verify there is no issues or conflicts. This is not the time for the utility company to begin the internal construction drawings. If you wait until this phase, any changes the utility construction department wants may not be accommodated. So get their input early. Designers need to know and to take into account that all existing facilities and operations, proposed phasing, improvements, highway drawings, and all the existing proposed utility relocations. Yes, we have occasionally changed the design of the project in this phase. That is why it's important for the utility companies to just take a look at all the plans. We really don't want to overlook anything, though it does happen. As you can see, each phase of a project has an important role, and this flowchart doesn't take into account the NTP process. That's a whole nother topic. So I have a question for you, and it's interactive. Why does DelDOT have so many phases? Okay, well, if you've answered B and C, you are correct. Though there are times we like to annoy the utility companies, just saying. But we do make every effort to reduce utility impacts and partner with them as best as we can. Information needed early. We understand everyone's busy, but our process is set up as a building block. Each phase of the process requires information in order for the project to go forward. So if we don't receive the utility information in a reasonable time frame, it is possible that the utility company cannot proceed with any of their preferred alignment, easement requests, or upgrades. Since we make every effort to acquire this information from you, it really is in your best interest to provide the request information for each phase. Another item to consider, though we focus on utility relocations and utility construction, we miss the challenges of getting electric service to the DelDOT facilities known as points of service. It is really important as we are designing these points of services that we ask the question of whether or not the preferred pole can handle this connection. As you can see in this picture, there's a whole lot of stuff on it. So the question would be, where could I possibly put a transformer on this pole? Another item to consider is how the proposed aerial lines are being installed crossing the existing facilities. This example shows the proposed aerial alignment lines crossing an existing facility. As we relocate, the question is, how are we going to keep these facilities in service while the proposed facilities are being relocated? Keep in mind that an outage may or may not be feasible. Therefore, this needs to be considered as utility companies are creating their design. My next question. There are how many times more chickens than there are people in Delaware? So if you've answered B, 200, you are correct. There are 200 more chickens in Delaware than people. Design changes. Let's take a look at them. One of our favorite topics and the biggest question is, why are we making design changes so late in the project? Why are these changes? It's because of drainage in the final plans, or the alignment was changed, or we're adding work so late. Didn't we consider this before? As things go, changes are made because of need. DelDOT gets a call and is asked to extend the project limits for a new or an existing issue. Oh, and can we make improvements to the sidewalk and bring them up to ADA standards? Human error, yep, we all make mistakes and need to correct them. Even though changes do happen, these changes cannot be made without thinking of the impacts of the project as a whole, not just the area of concern. Any changes may impact the utility relocations, and the designer should not just look at the utility to benefit the design change. Consider why the utility is in this location. Will it need to be adjusted? Can it be adjusted? What looks good on paper may not look good in the field. This slide shows a project where the design team changed the sidewalk between semifinals and finals. In redesigning the sidewalk, they moved the poles without coordinating with the pole owner. When the finals were reviewed, we caught the changes and had to make sure the pole locations worked with utilities' approval. Another example of where the utility submitted a design with the underground spaced out a lot. Once everyone was able to see each other's relocation, the project manager and the utility coordinator were able to create the design that was less impactful and in accordance with utility manual. Moving into utility changes their design after everything has been submitted. Again, my first question is why? As we talked in the previous slides, all the design and constructability of a submitted utility relocation design should have been completed. A minor tweak here or there isn't a big deal, but anything major is. Currently, we have a project where a pipeline company gave us final plans in June of 21. The NTP was issued in August of 21 for advanced relocations. This past November, their construction reviewed the project and changed a large portion of the relocation design. Well, construction is expected in April of 22, so DelDOT and the utility company still do not have an approved design. At this point, advanced relocation may not be possible due to the construction phasing, and the utility may be relocating during construction. This will cause a delay to the project and will cause the project to go over time and budget most likely. This is why it's important that you submit a constructible final relocation plan. Your change may be good for your facility, but may not be good for the others. Unless you coordinate these changes with the design team and other utilities, a major change in design cannot happen. Is the project constructible as designed? This is a very big question. Everyone zones in on their area of expertise. So this is why we have several sections involved in the project's review. It's easy to miss some of the details, and if you have been looking at the same project day in, day out, things are missed. It's up to us all to really put fresh eyes on the set of plans. Some of the questions we should be asking ourselves is, do the proposed pole locations conflict with the drainage? Note to self, pole owners do not like holding poles, and we should not consider this unless it's necessary. And there are times it is necessary. Is there a guy wire conflict? Will outages be changed? Water valves, fire hydrants, any of that stuff. Will a contractor be using large equipment during construction? Will the contractor want to change a design that may create conflicts with the aerials in the field? Hence, we need construction's buy-in. What work needs to be completed before the utilities begin the relocation adjustments? Have we compared the DelDOT traffic and lighting design with utility relocations? And can their designs be constructed as designed? Sometimes it appears that we've looked at every angle, but we can still miss stuff. It's bound to happen. Between the preliminary and the final plans phases, this topic of advanced relocation does come up. And why do we need advanced work? Well, having utilities relocate in advance makes sense if there is a lot of conflicts with roadway design, and it may be constructed with minimal impacts to the project and less impact to the public. However, some things will need to be done prior to advanced relocations, like clearing and grubbing, relocations of fences, anything that mailboxes maybe, or whatever, so on. And if we have authorization to work on the property, with advanced work, as much prep work as possible should be performed and stakeout is requested. Now, the big question is, does the project schedule account for advanced work? And I have another question. What are the most useful components of advanced utility inspection? Okay, if you answered all of the above, you are correct. Utility inspection team is a must. As we just decided to have the utility companies go in advance of construction, now what? The question always becomes, who's going to inspect the work? Over the years, our construction group has had a team perform the inspection. Though this has been great, We find that the area of utility installation is an unknown and requires different skills. Recently, we've had utility inspectors on projects have worked out, and it's worked out tremendously. And why do you ask? For starters, having one person is great. Any questions, issues, conflicts, we go to them, they handle it. They are the go-to person. They are able to stay on top of the utilities, make sure the construction keeps going, and are able to get as-built while the trenches are open. Again, the go-to people. They are the bridge between the utilities and the construction team. So there are benefits to utilities even. So now that we've covered the DelDOT benefits, there's also the benefits to the companies. Utility inspectors, again, is the bridge. So when there is when they have a constant contact, it's great because they are the bridge between the construction and the area engineer and are able to get answers quicker. Though getting answers from the utility companies can be a little challenging in itself, but it's up to the utility inspector to bother them for the answers. The utility has one person to go to instead of several, or who knows who to go to. This is usually a challenge in the past. Though there are many benefits, as you can see from this slide, I won't go over them all, but there are a lot of benefits here. And my next question. President John F. Kennedy helped open the Delaware Turnpike on November 14, 1963. True or false? Okay, if you've answered A for true, you are right. President Kennedy opened up the 59-mile Maryland Northeastern Expressway and the 11-mile Delaware Turnpike, standing on a platform that straddled the two states. 8 days later, on November 22nd, President Kennedy was assassinated in Texas. Hooray, we have a contractor. Now the challenges to start. Things to consider going into a project. The project has been finally awarded, the contractor has been selected, and now the fun begins. In the design phase, we put together a way to build the project. When the contractor comes on board, they may have another way to build it, which is referred to their means and methods. The contractor puts her schedules together, reviews the phasing, and now has a list of recommendations that may or may not be in everyone's best interest. They are recommending changes that should be beneficial. However, there are times when they want to make a change that may not be in the best interest of everyone, nor do they always take the utility work into consideration. It seems the contractor frequently alters the designs, phasing, timing, just to name a few. When I reference design changes, the contractor always wants to use precast wing walls, basins, and such to replace the poured in place items the job specifies. Though this is a cost and a time savings, it could be detrimental to the utility. Therefore, if an outage of a utility is stated that it cannot be provided, we must adhere to the utility statement. Another struggle we have is when the phasing and the durations are changed, especially when the utility is relocating during the construction. It's like a building block. Every block must be placed in the right spot in order for it to all fit together. If the phasing and the durations change, we must now see how the impacts to all the parties involved and the costs and delays may occur. This is why the utility designs and statements must not be changed when we are reviewing the contractor's means and methods without careful consideration and all parties, including the utilities, agree. Things happen, and there are times when the utility companies need to change their design. Though it may sound easy, it's not. The utility statement of work has to be held firm. This is why utility companies have to have their construction people involved early on, as I stated before. And once the utility company receives their NTP, they should be preparing their bid documents and packages, not designing their internal plans. Also, the design challenges may cause issues with the other utilities involved in the project. not to mention the project's design schedule. Any changes have to go back to the review process for approval. Any changes can be costly and delay the project. Therefore, we need to hold to the utility statement and schedule that we set forth. Here's an example of the utility companies plan the relocation prior to construction, but didn't consider how to keep the existing utilities in service. This is a perfect example of the things to consider in the design phase that wasn't. When we stumble upon these issues, a design change has to happen in the field. Sometimes it's minor, but not always. One thing we want to mention is any design change during construction has to be reviewed and approved by the project engineer. To make sure it can be done, we want to avoid impacts to the project and other utilities with any changes that may occur. This slide is an example of design versus construction. The design changes while the utilities are under construction. A corporation started construction and a commercial entrance had started to be constructed during the beginning phases of a project. Before the plans show no entrance in the utility relocation design, the after shows the entrance and surprisingly a minimal amount of change in design. Paving rehabs. Oh my. Everyone's favorite, a good paving rehab project. Did you know that it's most of the state's budget? It sure is. These projects are quick turnarounds and should be the least impactful. Therefore, the minimal amount of information is gathered and several locations are bundled together. To top it all off, there isn't a formal schedule for this project. So unfortunately, we can't give you an answer as to when, other than it will happen in the next couple of years. We understand it's a challenge to the utility companies when there is a cost, but not a year to budget for it. We are doing the best we can. Maintenance projects. Maintenance projects are just that. They perform maintenance on the state's infrastructure. These projects are just like the utilities maintaining their own facilities. DelDOT has usually an open PO with a contractor that they repair anything from drainage issues, guardrails, paving, you name it, they do it. Therefore, these projects come up fast and we do the best we can to let the utilities know. Designer managers need to understand when utilities are involved. Time needs to be taken into account for possible relocations, especially if there is reimbursement for the work. And the utilities need to understand the state needs a quick turnaround in their responses to keep going forward. Delays cause everybody issues. And my last question. Which public utility system came first in the USA? Okay, if you picked water, you are correct. In 1755, Hans Christopher Christensen instituted services for the first public water works in America in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I want to thank you everybody for letting me take your time. And I'm now going to turn this over to Steve Wright from our Canal Public Works Department.
And good morning, everybody. In case you're curious, I am maintenance and operations, which means I am that scary other side of DelDOT that I'll be talking with you about today. Excuse me. And I don't appear to have control. Yes, I do have control. Thank you so much. So I am, as I've already said, I'm the Canal District Public Works Engineer for Delaware Department of Transportation. And one of the things I want to talk to you guys about today is what exactly is public works? What do we do? Public Works fundamentally is responsible for all permitting of access to state right-of-ways. One of the things to really consider is who has access to a right-of-way, and fundamentally it's everybody. It is a legal entity of the state, and Delaware Department of Transportation has some responsibilities over that. We have the rights and responsibilities to publish standards and regulations for how anybody accesses that right-of-way. So you saw Mark Lutz and you saw Debbie all talk today about DelDOT's projects, which obviously there's a lot of them. Those have a big impact to utilities. But the other folks that are impacting utilities on a day-to-day basis are private development. And the other folks who are impacting on a day-to-day basis are the utilities. You guys yourselves are impacting each other as you go through and do construction improvements and maintenance of your own facilities. DelDOT Public Works processes about 3,000 utility permits. I rounded that up. It does vary enough where I thought just a nice convenient number. And just to toot my own horn, about 1,300 or 1,400 of those permits every year come from the Canal District, which covers all of Newcastle County. Our primary tool for processing all those permits is the Utility Permit Application, the UPA. It's a web-based service, which can be found at services.deldot.gov. For those of you curious, this is what that looks like. We obviously get a ton of permits every single day. This is just a random snapshot of what it was when I happened to pull the picture. I honestly can't recall exactly when that was, but this is what's just sort of constantly coming into my offices. It's a take a look at, it's how we track basically what everyone is doing in the right-of-way. And why do we do that? Why does Public Works do all those permits? DelDOT's Public Works, I already said, is in charge with inspecting and construction within the state of right-of-way for any of the private construction, so the private side of things, the scary non-DelDOT part, to keep coming back to Debbie's presentation. Do we document all that just so the big brother can always be watching? Absolutely. That is our primary purpose, is to track you guys and be big brother. Not really. There's a lot going on in the state of right-of-way, and fundamentally we have to track that so we can make sure that transportation is moving safely and effectively. Everybody's always under construction. Every road is always under construction in some fashion. Every single day. There's private construction taking right away every single day. There's utility maintenance and new construction taking place in the right of way every single day. And we need to be able to coordinate all that so there's not the conflicts, or to at least minimize the conflicts of all that activity. And still maintaining a safe, drivable roadway network and passable roadway network for the citizens of the state of Delaware who utilize it every day, who need it every day. The permits are how we document, how we move all those in the right of way to minimize those impacts. Finally, the permits are how we track what is physically in the right of way to inform future road construction projects and maintenance of the existing facilities. You saw the pictures of the projects from previous presenters, Debbie and Mark, where you basically go through and they showed what was in the right of way. That's how this is one of the first steps in how we track that. We know who's in the right of way in each individual section of a right of way. And we use this to help inform those decisions of who's going to be impacted whenever anybody's doing construction. So why is Public Works calling you as a utility company? I'm assuming that's who I'm talking to. Is it because someone called Public Works, because you don't have a permit, because something went wrong? The answer to those questions are yes, it's all those things. If you go out and you close a road and you don't bother to tell anybody, eventually somebody decides to start calling around, and we eventually start calling around to figure out what you're doing out there. As is the case in this particular situation, it was a completely legitimate maintenance problem. A pole had gone down. It happens. We're very much aware. You guys are aware. That is what life is. But when you do that, you're obligated to contact the TMC as well as Delaware Department of Transportation Public Works in order to let us know, so that we can start letting folks know and we can properly prep traffic for that impact. We need to make sure that safety of the traveling public is maintained at all times. So who calls Public Works? Well, it can be state representatives. It can be Jane and Joe Public. Other utilities, other sections within DelDOT, surveyors and engineering firms, pretty much everybody, but most importantly, hopefully you. So whenever you're doing maintenance, whenever you're doing a project in your own facilities, you need to let us know so that we can identify any of the conflicts I've already mentioned. And these are happening every day. This is just a random photograph of a random water main burst. We had our first bad winter in about 2 or 3. So we've had a lot of these this winter. I'm sure a lot of the folks on this summit here have been dealing with this all winter. This is a very common sight on our roadways, specifically because of the first bad winter in a number of years. And this stuff happens, and we need to make sure we're prepared for it and tracking it. What do we do? What does Public Works do after that random citizen calls? We identify the location from the contact. If you've ever been contacted by a random citizen who says there's a pothole, you know it's a very challenging process. Most people actually, ironically, can't find a location. It's shocking in this day and age of GIS, where most people can't figure out where they're at when they're doing something. So a significant part of our job is literally just going out and trying to figure out who's complaining about what and finding the specific problem. Then a public works inspector lays eyes on the issue to field verify and predict the cause. And I say predict the cause legitimately. There's all kinds of reasons why a pothole can be out there. There's all kinds of reasons why a section of roadway can fail. And we have to make a decision on who we think is most likely the culprit. It could be DelDOT itself. It could be simply a failure has occurred in the roadway and that we need to get maintenance out there to fix a pothole. That absolutely happens every single day. But the other problem is it could be a utility could have put in a patch. It could be a failure of a system underground that has caused a hole to form underground, which has then caused a failure of the roadway above or the sidewalk above. Or it could just been a construction project that didn't have the best patch. So the root cause of the complaint is not always obvious. We photo document the issue and geolocate the failure so that we can then track it down to others. Back in the office, the inspector and their manager will target the issue in GIS and superimpose the known permits and utility locations. They will call who we consider to be the most likely responsible party. Sometimes we're wrong. There's a lot of places where utilities overlap and cross each other, and sometimes it's not utility A, it's utility B. These things happen. But we reach out to them and we let everybody know when we get folks out there to get them fixed. So, do you have any questions for me? This is a photograph of our brand new building that's not quite complete. We're not quite in it right now. This is the Canal District Public Works Office. So on Bear Christiana Road. If the old facility had a very government bunker look to it, and I hope we've improved it significantly with this pretty little building here that you'll be seeing us in. But with that said, do you have any questions for me?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Debbie. At this point, there are no questions in the Q&A, but if you guys hang around, if there's any that come in for you, hopefully we can get those addressed. So thank you, guys. Next, we're going to move into a presentation on MOT, and Dan Thompson will take it over. And Dan, you might be muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now, Eric?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, yeah, my button went away. All right, so I'm Dan Thompson. I am the South District DelDOT Safety Officer. I'm going to give you guys a little presentation here on maintenance of traffic. So some of the things that we're going to go over in this here is coordination, what needs to happen prior to the permitting, the review and implementation of work out in the field, notification. So who needs to be notified, when, and what they need to be notified of. Common issues that we find in the UPA, be it the submission or implementation out in the field. Subcontractor issues with Delaware guidelines. Some considerations for MOT providers. Some frequent examples of errors that we see out in the field. And then I'm going to touch on some pedestrian issues that we do have come up quite often. And then if we have some time, questions too. All right, so coordination. So prior to the utility permit submission, so if there are any questions about the MOT or anything that you guys may come up with, feel free to contact the utility section and traffic safety. We're more than willing to help guide the correct direction. So there isn't any holdup or back and forth in the UPA. I'd rather get a phone call. Any of us would, just to keep the process moving, and that way when everything is submitted, we can just push it right through. Coordination with capital and advanced utility relocations. These will all have a set of approved MOT plans. So any changes or modifications will have to be coordinated with traffic safety and the construction staff. They're typically going to be held in place, but we may be able to make some small modifications to those. Any advanced utility work that comes along with a capital project, they're all going to be governed by the restrictions that are given to that project. So any time restrictions, lane closures, any typical applications that are given in that project will be the MOT that you guys will have to follow as well. And then we'll also need you guys to make sure everybody's playing well together in the sandbox. So make sure that you guys are coordinating with, you know, adjacent projects so that any road work or construction or MOT that's happening in the area, need to make sure that we don't have any overlap and that everything is in compliance out there. All right, so notification. So any work within the state right of way, you guys need to make sure that you're notifying the TMC, which is our Transportation Management Center, on daily activities. The phone numbers here on the slide. Some of the things that they're going to need to know is where you guys are on the road, what's being affected, what MOT is in place, duration, a contact person in the field, and then they're going to need a phone call at the end of the day saying, hey, we're all picked up and ready to go, or what condition the road may be left in. Then you also want to make sure that the utility section, public works, be it a capital project, they're all notified on a daily basis of where you are, what's going on. We on our side of the house rely on them to get our information so we can make sure that all the MOT is set up correct. All of our contact personnel is here. We have currently we have 4 safety officers, 1 per district. Right now there's a list here and we can get you all those contacts if you guys don't have them. Do have a couple new guys. All right, so some common issues that we see in the UPA. So typical application submission. When submitting the UPA permit under the typical application section, there's an actual section for that, and make sure that you provide the TA that you're going to be utilizing. A lot of the times we find that they're blank or they're put in the wrong spot. They're hard for us to find. And that just kind of holds up the process. Just make sure that everything is being submitted where it needs to be. We still are seeing some old case numbers being used. I believe they went out in 2009. So anything that's submitted needs to be up to speed with the current manual and the TAs that are in them. And then a lot of the times too, we'll see that permits are being submitted with the same TAs. You know, one particular company will always submit, 3 and a 10, be it whatever roadway they're on. Again, sometimes it's helpful to have the actual field personnel or somebody who understands the work in the field to be the one who's actually submitting the permits. I know some of the companies they'll have their administration fill out the permits and submit them for them, and they don't really have that good of an understanding of what's going on, and this will cause some kickback. We'll bounce back and forth. We need this, we need that. Whereas if we had somebody, field personnel to do that, then we would negate those problems. All right, subcontractor issues. So this is more pertaining to like out-of-state contractors. When we get on these bigger projects, they're not overly familiar with the Delaware standards. Say you've got a company coming from North Carolina or New Jersey, somewhere like that, coming to work in Delaware. They don't know that we have a specific set of guidelines, and that needs to be conveyed to them. We have our own MUTCD where we've gone above and beyond, and we have some other requirements in there. They also in the field, they'll need to have the contract guidelines and time restrictions too. They'll need to know when they can and cannot be out there, be it on the permit or on the actual set of plans. Field issues with resolution. So sometimes when we go out in the field with the subcontractors, we need to know who the point of contact is, be it a representative from the utility company, be it a representative from the subcontractor who's working out there. It doesn't matter to us who it is. We just need to make sure that we have somebody out there who we can actually talk to and get resolution. A lot of time we'll go out and there'll be the blame game. Well, I didn't know, or it was their responsibility. It doesn't matter to us. We just want to make sure that there's somebody designated out there in the field to field those questions and to fix those problems. All right. So we've got some considerations for MOT subcontractors. So these will be more like your subs that are working from in the state that just are there just for your MOT. There needs to be a information exchange. They need to know what's happening, what kind of work's going on. Are you guys going to be closing a shoulder? Going to be closing sidewalks? Going to be closing lanes? Are things going to be changing throughout the day? They need to make sure that they have the signage, the personnel to do those kind of things, because out in the field, conditions change, situations change, setups change. They need to make sure that they come prepared for that. And they'll also need to know the timing in the field too. So if you guys are going to be getting into night work, that triggers some extra MOT, different kind of MOT, different devices that need to be used for nighttime operations. And then responsibility. So ultimately, it's the responsibility. It's the utility's responsibility of doing the work to ensure that the MOT is being set up and in place and placed correctly. It doesn't matter who the subcontractor is, and we don't want to hold up any work we want to get done, but we got to make sure it's done correctly and safely. So some frequently seen errors in the field. This looks like a picture of this, could be the smallest work zone in the state, or is it an overlapping signage issue? And this kind of stuff can be handled very, very easily by just going down to the next job site and saying, hey, we're setting up here in the same area. We can cover our signs. We can cover one of yours, and just everybody playing good in the sandbox. Some errors we see with flaggers. So when you're flagging in the state of Delaware, you need to be certified in the state of Delaware. Some states just follow set federal standards, just like with our MUTCD. We need to make sure that the flaggers that are flagging in Delaware are certified through somebody like ATSA, who we recognize, and their card will actually say Delaware on them. Some of the errors we'll see with signage, incorrect height. So signs, temporary signs, your daily signs have to be at least 5 foot from the bottom of the road surface to the bottom of the sign. Incorrect spacing for the typical applications or the roadway. I'll have a chart in the next slide or two. And you can reference the MUTCD for that chart. Based on your roadway and your speed, you can figure out what your sign spacing should be. And then another issue too with one of these photos we have is signs being stored in the right of way when they're not in use. So if you're going to be on a site for a week, 2 weeks, however long, when you guys are done at the end of the day, all those signage and it needs to be picked up, removed from the right of way, either put behind positive protection or removed from the site until the following day. So some errors that we see with devices, be it drums, cones, barricades, things of those natures. They're damaged, dirty, or they're non-compliant. You can see a couple of these photos up here. They're reflective materials gone or non-existent. We also see incorrect spacing between devices. So that's going to be based on the speed limit of the roadway. So one of your photos up here, you got 2 lanes closed within maybe 100 foot. You need to follow those charts that we're going to go over here in a minute to determine what your taper lengths and what your tangent lengths are going to be on any of your closures. So the next slide here is your typical applications and your calculations. So the one on the left is a typical lane closure on a multi-lane highway. The one on the right is a typical lane closure on a 2-lane roadway. Probably the ones that you're going to see and use most of the time. The ones in the charts in the middle, the one on the bottom is going to be for your advanced warning sign spacing. So it depends on your type of roadway, and that'll get you your sign spacing there. And then the chart there on the top, that's how you figure out what your taper and your tangent lengths are going to be. And that's all based on roadway speed and the type of roadway. And then also if you're shifting, there's some different calculations in there for that as well. So rolling roadblocks. So this is another special case of MOT that we use. You'll see this mostly with aerial crossings when you need to stop multiple lanes of travel to run like a span of wire or something across the road. We don't allow live traffic under something that's not secure. So we'll use rolling roadblock. We'll have TMAs in each lane, police officers out there blocking the entire roadway so that run can be done. So these need to be pre-approved and coordinated with traffic safety. We like to come out and make sure that everything is being done as it should be. Usually these only take 10-15 minutes depending on what your guys' needs are to get the utility up and secured. Pedestrian issues, they've become more prevalent as we have been growing our pedestrian facilities. We need to maintain them. Pedestrians are treated just like a vehicle. So if you block a sidewalk or block a curb ramp, it's the same thing as blocking a lane. So that ped or that bike needs to be provided for. So it's important to know the area that you're working in because it can become tricky, especially down here in the beach area. You can use pedestrian detours. So if a ped's taken away from their sidewalk, you can build a path with approved material. You can do dedicated pedestrian flagging, or if the facilities are there, it's set up like a block configuration, you can do a detour pretty easily. Those typically will need to be submitted prior to when you're submitting in the UPA or something of that nature. Submitting just a typical, hey, we need to put up a pedestrian detour probably isn't going to cut it because every situation seems to be a little different. So that's one of those situations where you can feel free to reach out to us and we'll certainly help get you through and get you the best option there. We do have specific MOT down in the beach area south of Dewey. The shoulder is actually a bike and pedestrian lane. So we've come up with a typical application where you're actually going to close the lane adjacent to that shoulder, put the peds and bikes in it, and then you're going to have the work area in the shoulder. It involves placing channelizing devices a little bit different. You're going to separate those peds and bikes in that lane as well, and then you're also going to have specific signage in there too. But we have that all on our plans here. So when you are setting up a site like that, you would need to make sure that whatever work you're doing takes place outside of that area that you're providing for the peds and bikes. Some of the photos that are here, you can see that they did that. They set that lane up, but then the equipment that they're using is actually blocking those lanes and preventing peds or bikes from being able to use those facilities. So it's important that you guys are maintaining what you guys are setting up and making sure that the peds, bikes, and traffic is still able to flow. So if you guys need to close a road, do a detour, submit a detour into the UPA, there's a process for that. So they need to be submitted to traffic safety for review and approval. You can do that prior. I would suggest that you do that prior to the submission in the UPA, where we get it all done. And when you submit everything, everything's already done and approved. It's got to be on our border and a legend. It has to be signed and sealed by an engineer. It needs to be in the UPA, so it needs to be uploaded to the permit. And the project manager with DelDOT, which is on our side of the house, will have to submit a road closure form along with the signed detour. So once all that's completed, the traffic safety officer for that specific district will then approve the road closure, and then everything can proceed. If you have questions about detour or where you would submit them or anything like that, David Wynn is our contact within traffic safety, and I've attached his information here. And that's what I have. So if you guys have any questions and we have some time, I'll certainly answer.
Thanks, Dan. So there are some questions, so I'll go over those for you. First one, is there a link we can get containing a constantly updated list of contacts for all 3 DelDOT areas, which includes inspectors, traffic safety, utility section contact for MOT considerations? So I would say from your side, is there a place folks can go to see who the contacts are for traffic?
As far as I know, no, but we can certainly put something out to the utilities and push it out, as we get new staff or something like that in. I don't think that we have like a site where you can go and see who the current safety officer is.
Yeah, and I believe that's the case for the public works offices as well. So we can talk about that further and see what we can do there. All right, next question. For utility work that requires vehicle or PED detours, do you allow and or require the utility company to develop the detour plan or plans? Do the plans need to be signed by a PE? And what is the plan review protocol when local public works office and traffic safety folks, between local public works office and traffic safety folks?
Okay, so yes, we don't develop the detours for them. So the utility would develop the detour on their own. They would submit them to us for review and approval. They do need to be signed and sealed by a PE. They just need to make sure that they use our border and our legend. Once that's done, they can submit it either through the EPA. It'll just take a little bit longer, a little more back and forth, or they can submit it straight to that traffic safety officer or through the public works section, and we'll all work together to get it through.
Very good. And then the last question at this time is, does DelDOT provide courses for MOT management / coordination?
I believe that they were working on courses. I think it was just internally. One of the next presenters, Jerry, I think he was working on something at some point. He might be able to speak more to that. But as far as I know right now, no, we don't have anything for external companies.
Very good. All right, Dan, I appreciate it. That was the last question we have at this point. If you're going to hang on, just if you see anything come up, don't feel free to jump in and answer any questions.
Will do.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right. Next, we're going to move into the emergency response presentation, and I'll be leading that one off. And Jerry Nagiski and Steve Wright will also be participating. All right. So, poll question. What option below illustrates an emergency? New utility work being installed in the right-of-way, vegetation has grown around aerial lines, roadway washed out, vehicle struck and damaged a utility pole. All right, so this is a bit of a trick question. C and D are kind of obvious, but A and B could also institute an emergency depending on the situation. So what is an emergency? So Delaware Code defines an emergency, and the utility manual references those definitions. So the first one comes from Delaware Code, Title 26, Chapter 8, which is the Mish Utility Law, states a situation where the safety of the traveling public or general public or the structural integrity of the highway facility is placed in immediate danger. And then further, Delaware Code references any condition constituting a clear and present danger to life, health, or property. So essentially, it's a situation where immediate action is required. So next question, what are some challenges associated with emergency responses? Safety is a big one. So communication, MOT, safety, and access appear to be at the top of that list. Next question, are emergency situations addressed as quickly as they should be by all parties? So the majority is sticking with no there. All right, so of course in these situations, safety is paramount. It's not just the safety of the traveling public, but definitely the safety of the workers trying to fix the situation. And folks need to respond immediately to make the scene safe as quickly as possible. And it requires response from all utilities. So the pictures you'll see in this presentation, most of them are from Delaware situations. The one shown here was actually a situation up north. And then this is what it looked like under the drum. So again, utility companies need to respond to an incident prepared to take control of the scene. I know there's been a lot of these brought to my attention here recently, and when we find out about it, we try to reach out to the utility companies that may be impacted, and we try to get resolution as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, a lot of these situations are going to occur outside of business hours, so that's where communication becomes paramount. But everybody needs to be prepared to come to the scene immediately and start working. So what are some different types of emergencies? Could be main breaks, could be cables down, poles down, a situation where an excavator damages a facility. Or it could be down vegetation, or vegetation that's leaning into cables. Obviously, from an electrical standpoint, that's going to receive a lot of quick attention, but it's also important to address the comms component. You know, even though those may not have the electricity running through them, it's still a dangerous situation, and we need everybody's assistance in trying to resolve those issues. So I'm going to turn it over to Jerry to take over the MOT portion.
All right, thanks, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got
Eric?
you.
All right, cool, awesome. All right, so we're talking about the METCD Part 6. Part 6I in the manual relates to emergencies. Traffic incidents can be divided in 3 general classes, each with their individual unique traffic control characteristics. Classes start with like a major incident, intermediate, and minor. Major incident is defined as an expected duration of more than 2 hours. Intermediate is expected 30 minutes to 2 hours, and minor incident expected duration under 30 minutes. So what's the reality? Most utility emergencies fall into the major classes. So some things to note, most time DelDOT's on scene before the utility companies are. Just note that this is temporary in nature. If the emergency falls into the major category, mobilize your MOT immediately to take over for DelDOT. This is especially important during storm events because DelDOT's, you know, with winter season, we're focused on plowing and salting the roads to get things opened up. We can't tie up our forces on a lot of down utility lines or water main breaks or what have you. So the faster you can mobilize your MOT, the better off everyone will be. Again, it's been hit on a few times about communication. As soon as you're on scene, contact DelDOT's Transportation Management Center. You can call in the number or #77 from your cell phone and contact DelDOT's Public Works Inspectors. And this is basically to establish points of contact. Stay in contact with the TMC, give hourly updates so that everyone knows what's going on and we can alert the public as well. Then notify the TMC once all the work is completed and everything's been reopened. So we'll talk about some primary functions of temporary traffic control, especially during incidents. We need to inform the road users of the incident. How many times have we had the road closed and people come up to us and they say, what's going on? We have no idea. We just have some cones and a truck out here. We need to do a better job of informing the motorists as to what's going on. And we need to provide some guidance around the path to follow. And this is really important so that if we help the motorists get around the scene, it protects the utility workers and lessens drivers' frustration. And here are a couple, as far as incidents go, the MBTCD allows for coral color signs, just to note that it's an emergency and not a standard construction zone. And of course, during an emergency, you can always use the standard construction zones. So I'm gonna go over some typical applications. I know Dan touched on a couple that are primary to utilities. So we have the TA3, which is basically shoulder closure on a multi-lane roadway. TA3A, this is a shoulder closure on a multi-lane roadway. All right, TA10, flagging operations on a 2-lane, 2-way road. 11B. 11B is a lane shift on a 2-lane, 2-way road. This is one that we like to use a lot because we talk a lot about lane restrictions as to what time of day. If we can maintain capacity, we typically do not restrict the times of work. Again, TA13, so Dan touched base on some like aerial work, working over live traffic. If we have this is basically a 15-minute road closure on a 2-lane, 2-way road, which flaggers just stop traffic so that aerial lines can be pulled across or plates can be shifted around for doing an open trench, or things of that nature. And typically we like to do these on low volume roads. However, we have allowed them on higher volumes just in off-peak times. Again, TA20. So this is the template for detours for closing a road, regardless if it's multi-lane or 2-way, 1-way streets or whatever. So this is just guidance as to when the utility companies, if you're going to do your own detour plan or have a designer do it, this is the guidance to follow. 21, this is basically a lane closure on a multi-lane roadway at an intersection. 21 is the near side. TA23 is the far side of the intersection. So basically how we close the lane and still open up pockets for turn lanes. All right, 21A is a fairly new typical application. This is where we're just closing a turn lane. So rather than putting shoulder closed or right lane, we now require the use of right turn lane or left turn lane. All right, and here is a TA27, it's an intersection closure. Again, if you're working in the middle of an intersection, pulling lines over the intersection, again, we prefer this at low volume during off-peak times, but this is a way to flag through the whole intersection. All right, Dan did a good job touching base on pedestrian MOT. So this is TA28, which is basically a detour guidelines for detour and PEDs, or creating an alternate path around the work zone. Please note that whatever alternate path we use has to meet or exceed the existing conditions. All right, TA29 is more of a crosswalk, instituting like a mid-block crossing for a detour route. These will have to be designed and reviewed in depth because we typically don't want to put mid-block crossings in unless it's absolutely necessary. All right, Dan touched TA33s, lane closure on a multi-lane highway, divided, high speed. And TA35H, which is the rolling roadblock. Again, we don't allow work over live traffic, so this is, again, coordinate with us and your public works contacts. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, so now it's going to go over to Steve.
All righty, so you saw this picture once before, but in an emergency situation, these are the types of things I want to start hitting on the things that you should be considering, and we should all be considering. One, secure the site. You've seen a lot of MOT, and we focus at DelDOT at how to maintain the traffic. In other words, how to get folks still driving and keep the roads moving. But I want to really emphasize the point that other purpose of that maintenance of traffic is to keep the traffic out of your construction site and protect the workers who are going to be doing the work needed to get that facility back operational. We want to make sure that the traffic's safe, but more importantly, we want to make sure you guys are safe. The other thing to consider is, as you've already hit on at least twice so far, is the fact that we want to try to keep the pedestrians out of that construction site. So we want to have them routed around so they're still moving, but most importantly, and as importantly, are not moving through your construction site. That keeps it safe for everybody. Things to consider, and it should always be available when you're going out to do a construction project because of maintenance or some form of emergency. So once again, secure the site. Establish your maintenance of traffic as soon as possible. If DelDOT is not already present, contact us. Be prepared to tell us the location. Be prepared to tell us the nature of the emergency. Be prepared to tell us the current impact to traffic. Now, these are all the things that we're going to need to know so that we can either facilitate you, help you, or to get the traffic, notify the drivers to stay away from the incident. DelDOT tracks interruptions in traffic via the TMC, as you've already seen. Always remember it's the right of way. You have the right to be there, but so does everyone else. So if you don't want the public walking through your construction site, we need to give them some way of getting around it and keep everybody moving. So you guys lost my voice, it looks like. Okay. Emergency permits. District Public Works Office is notified of all emergency utility work. Emergency permits shall be submitted ASAP. If work performed after hours, permit should be submitted in the following business day to outline everything. Permit and associated restoration will be inspected and tracked per the manual, and Public Works inspectors will determine the scope of the repair needed in the right-of-way. This incident here is just a fairly typical, vehicle unfortunately came off the road, hit a pole. Pole came down. Unfortunately, what was left there is that last segment. Whenever there's a lot of different utilities all on the same pole, obviously there's a priority to getting the folks off. The first step, obviously, is to get the new pole up. In this particular case, it was the power company who did so. That was great. In this particular problem, for our perspective, it's the fact that that section of pole remained sitting there. Now, it's a little hard to see from this photo. The only other photo I had was had the truck actually sort of there in the way. But that pole is hanging about truck windshield elevation over the shoulder. So in other words, if someone had swerved there, they would have still ran into that facility. Unfortunately, we weren't finding that we were getting the response from utilities in terms of that would be, quote, an emergency from their perspective. But from our perspective and from the safety of the traveling public, that very much was. So I wanted to sort of highlight that and discuss just the aspects that we look at it versus sometimes with the utility companies. Could I get you to push me back? I'm not fully. Could you push me back 2 slides? I don't currently have control over the slides. There. Okay, now go one forward. Perfect. Scope of work. One of the reasons you're contacting Public Works is to have us come out there and take a look at the scope of work. Sometimes, actually, I'll take a step back. This is actually the same water main break that I've shown a couple locations. Water mains happen. Water main bursts, they happen. As I already said, it's wintertime, and we've had 2 relatively mild winters, which means we had reduction in total breaks in the last 2 years, which means the facilities that were under a lot of stress tend to be failing this year. This one was a fairly sizable one. So the first picture that I showed, and you've seen a couple times, was the original burst, but that went in a line straight down the roadway. So one of the reasons that Public Works needs to be called right of way is because we have to go out there and we have to help identify what the actual scope of the project is. So where the failure damaged the road. It is the responsibility for the utility to maintain traffic during the entire maintenance operation. As we've talked on the previous, if you've seen on previous slides, oftentimes we're talking about an emergency as something that's a quick fix. This is not a quick fix. This is the other type of operation that can happen through maintenance, where it's a substantial impact. There's going to be a lot of work. It's going to take some time to get this constructed. So to keep in mindset for the utility companies, what we're trying to encourage you guys to do is to really think that through, and to know that sometimes these situations are going to last you a long time. It's not going to be, I'm going to fix it and call in and be done. Public Works will be on site to determine the scope of the repairs the next day. One of the things I like about this photograph, I'll talk about it, is I've got the nice little shadow of the Public Works inspector taking the photograph. They're out there and to take a look and make sure we're all in accordance with the maintenance requirements. No steel plates during the winter. You can't put those down. It occurred in a couple of TAs and shown previously. But we can't put those down in the wintertime. We have specific requirements for when those are done, basically because of snowplows. We will take those things and throw them. When the plants close, anticipate pouring more concrete for underground work. And you see this already happening in this particular project where they had to pour the concrete in order to secure the section once they were done working. And the other reason I love this photograph, and it's probably the most important, the reason why it's in this presentation, is this compaction equipment out here. We've been seeing a lot of failures of patches this winter, and my strong hypothesis is that those are failing because the lack of compaction underneath the patch jobs. You know, I hate to say it, but between COVID and 2 mild winters, not just DelDOT and not just utilities, but all the construction companies out there are working with a lot of folks who aren't as experienced as they used to be. And so they're making some pretty beginner errors, and I hate to say it, but it's happening to all of us, and I think it behooves us to just discuss them. Typical soil, if you just sort of dump it down into a hole, if you're doing, say, 3 feet of fill, that soil is going to drop an inch or two in a fairly short period of time if you don't do compaction on it. So you could have the best patch job in the world, and if you didn't have compaction underneath it, within 48 hours, that patch is going to completely blow out and fail. And you're going to be back out there with potholes and damaged vehicles, and folks are going to be calling their representatives and their insurance companies, and it's going to be a mess. So if I go out to a site and I don't see any compaction equipment at all on a project, specifically on an emergency this big, I get quite irritated. So expect to see that, expect to have it. Make sure to train your folks to use it. We need to make sure that soil is compacted, because that grade will fail if it doesn't. And finally, all your utility work has a 3-year warranty per permit, so just keep that in mind. If you do it right the first time, you probably won't ever have to use that warranty. So really encourage you to sort of think that through. And I know your guys are experiencing the same thing we're experiencing, which is getting our folks trained properly with all the interruptions we've had to work in the recent past. Finally, what is an acceptable utility response time for an emergency situation? What should you expect to be out there in terms of? So I see minutes. That seems pretty aggressive. Good for you. I respect your work ethic. Sometimes I can't even identify where the problem is in minutes. It sometimes takes me longer than that, but good job. I see hours. I see ASAP, as soon as possible. That's a great answer. 60 minutes now, varies by issue. I don't like that answer so much. I think that it's much more reasonable that when you're called, you need to have your staff ready to get out there. Definitely hours, and not a lot of hours. So take that into account. I think we're working on something you might be expecting in the future is something a little more rigid in our utilities permits, in terms of what that expectation is, in terms of how long until you guys have your own site secure. But we need a response quickly. We can't leave a hole in the road and the traveling public just exposed to it, because they're going to be looking for rectification. If they aren't, their insurance companies sure are, and that'll impact all of us. And Eric, I am not fully able to control this right now, so you might need to take. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
All right. So what can be done to improve utility emergency response times? such a good question. Nobody wants to respond. Communication, that's good. Coordination. Resources seems to be a common theme as well. All right.
This is the best response we've had all day.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. So the moral of the story is changes are needed. We need to improve on emergency responses. So moving forward, we will be working with companies to try to improve on this. One of the things that I will be doing is circling out with the various companies to ensure that the emergency contact numbers we have is correct for each company, and to try to define, to try to define an emergency or a company no response escalation process. So essentially, no matter what the work, whether it's emergency related or if it's just permit or highway work, creating an escalation process to know if we're working with individual X at the company and we're not getting what we need, what's the time frame and what's the next step that we need to go to try to push that issue to get the responses that we need. So in the big picture, everyone needs to work together for the safety and overall good of the public, right? So we're all in the business of providing for our customers, and that's what this all boils down to. We need to do better for them. Again, moving forward, part of the utility manual revisions did have additional language related to emergencies and the associated responses. So that will be in there moving forward. Unfortunately, since we don't know what the timing of that will be, we're going to be looking at what we can do to update policy in the meantime to more immediately address the issues and concerns. So some of the things that we have under consideration at this point, you know, trying to figure out a process forward if it's DelDOT notifying the utility of the situation versus the utility notifying DelDOT of a situation. Response timeframes, there will probably be a verbal component where we need positive response verbally from the utility company within a certain time frame, but more importantly, we need boots on the ground, folks on site with the proper equipment and MOT to perform the work, and what that time frame looks like. So the big thing, as has been mentioned multiple times, is the utility needs to establish MOT and take over the scene. Realizing in like a utility pole scenario, there's multiple utilities at play. So the potential of the electric company being the first to work and at the top of the pole, establishing MOT, performing their work, and then the next company down from the comms perspective being on site, establishing MOT, taking the scene from the electric company, and so on. So that'll be discussed further. Again, as mentioned previously, the utility companies need to keep DelDOT and other utilities updated on status. So obviously the communication with DelDOT through our TMC section and through our public works offices is crucial, but the communication has to happen between the utility companies as well. The one picture that Steve had shown, to me, that screams there was lack of communication between the electric company and the attachers. That may not be what happened, but for something to be left like that and not addressed, that seems like a big communication breakdown. So ultimately, we're trying to set accountability for everybody, and we're trying to figure out how the non-conformity will be handled. So we appreciate everybody's attention. I've provided contact information for myself, Jerry, and Steve here. I've also provided a link to the Delaware MUTCD, so folks have reference for that. And I do see we have a question in the chat. So the question here is, what vegetation management partners does DelDOT work with? Asplund with question marks. When roads are inaccessible because of downed trees, this can be a situation that can impact electric, transportation, and many citizens. Does DelDOT have a division that can respond to assist with downed trees, or does DelDOT rely on this work being completed by partners? So it depends. So DelDOT does have a contract through our maintenance side of the world with vegetation contractors. Our maintenance forces will also handle vegetation, but depending on the nature of the downed vegetation, specifically with electric, if it's within the primary zone of electric, the electric company is going to handle that. So even though we may have contracts with companies like Asplund that are certified to be in the electric zone, typically that's going to be handled by the electric company. And then it becomes more difficult when that vegetation is strictly on communication facilities. That becomes a lot more conversations as to who's going to address what, because of some company policies that are in place with certain utility companies. So that's part of what needs to be discussed further. But ultimately, the goal we're looking at is all of us, DelDOT and utility companies, working together to try to clear that type of situation up as quickly as possible. All right. So we are ahead of schedule, which everyone should expect when dealing with utility companies, because we're just awesome. So I appreciate everybody's time. I am going to turn it over to Monroe to close us out.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And hopefully everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. So my name is Monroe Height, Chief Right-of-Way for DelDOT. I would like to provide some closing remarks to all of you, but before we do so, we have some polling questions. So again, if you could use the text DelDOT, if you haven't already, you should have 222-333, and then provide answers to the polling questions. So we're going to go to that. So the first question, what topics or areas did you expect to learn about today? Just tell us one or two words. Coming in, what did you anticipate learning today or wanted to hear about? Again, we wanted to get your feedback, which will help us as far as planning for next year. Again, hopefully is all, the way things are now in person. So I'll give you a few minutes to respond, or a few seconds. Emergency, lessons learned, schedule, we talked about schedule, procedures, projects, permitting. Okay. So it seems like we've hit on a lot of things with the presentations today, which is good. I see some new, some other items that we can talk about for next year or start planning for next year. Accountability, it's good. Coordination, we'll speak to that once we're done the polling question. Okay, good. Thank you for that. I'll go to the next question. I'll give still a couple more. Okay. The next question, what are your main takeaways from today's summit? Just a word or two, what you will take away from today's meeting. Accountability again, communication, coordination, lessons, big need. Good. Give it another 10 seconds. I know there's still folks trying to, and we, like Eric said, we are ahead of schedule. So money, yep. Very good. So of those, obviously safety, coordination, obviously those are the key. And we'll talk about that here in a minute as far as, all the presentations or most of the presentations earlier. You've heard about the infrastructure bill coming. You heard about all the projects we have, the Utility Coordination Council that was established and the recommendations moving forward, and the work that the subcommittee groups will be doing to address this. So, all right, well, thank you all for that. The next question, how would you rate your remote experience? A, excellent, B, pretty good, good, fair, poor. So for most folks, it's been, excellent, pretty good, a few good. We try to make today, as well as I think Shantae mentioned earlier, our annual winter workshop, try to make it as interactive as possible, given the virtual component. Okay, so for the most part, okay, good, thank you. And the last question I have is, and this probably of the four, probably the most important question, to get your feedback for next year, is what topics would you like to learn more about at future summits? This is key and critical for us as far as planning for next year. Obviously, again, the way things are now, transitioning back to in-person, we'll be utilizing and reaching out to a lot of you to help with providing presentations and having some interactive discussions like we had in the past. So this is key as far as trying to plan for next year. Again, utility coordinations, lessons learned, technology. Just trying to look at electricity reimbursement, innovations, accountability through most of the polling. So that's key. And again, the Utility Coordination Council, as far as holding everyone to be accountable to their schedule, to providing the coordination that's required for us to meet our projects. So good. Just give it another 10 seconds for those that are still. All right, so appreciate everyone taking time to do those polling questions. I'd like to just housekeeping wise, a couple of reminders. One, our annual lessons learned workshop is scheduled for Monday, March 7th and Tuesday, March 8th. Both are half days. I believe the 7th is in the afternoon. The 8th is in the morning. Registration is open. So if you haven't registered, please do so. Registration closes on March 3rd. Those that are participating today that wish to receive PDH credit, make sure to complete the evaluation form when it's sent and submit that by the deadline. That information will be coming out to everyone shortly. So please do so if you wish to receive PDH credit. I'll be remiss not to mention some thank yous. So I'll start first with Sandy Wolf with the T-Squared with the University of Delaware for assisting us with the registration. Again, Sandy has done so for the past several years, but has also done it for, last week for the winter workshop, today for our utility summit, and then again in a couple of weeks for our lessons learned workshop. So thank you, Sandy, for all your hard work with that. Todd Revis and his team with IT as far as the virtual component, which has been key, obviously for the last 2 years. So we can't thank him enough and his team for assisting not only with the virtual component, but also with the polling to help facilitate and make it more interactive for everyone. As some of you, one of the polls earlier in the presentation, there's a lot of new folks that this is their first time attending a utility summit, which is good. For those who remember, 2019, I believe, was our last in-person summit where we utilized polling during the presentation. So this is great that even at with virtual, we're able to provide and get feedback from all of you virtually as well. So thank you, Todd, and your team. I want to also thank our DelDOT utility staff, Eric, Debbie, Chuck, James, Becky, and Barb for all your hard work. Not only just preparing for today, but also year-round with coordination and schedules and trying to meet everyone's deadline and issues. So we thank you for that. I want to thank the performance management staff, John, Danny, and Bob for assisting us with all the technical and assistance with preparing for today. So thank you all for that as well. But last but not least, I can't thank enough to the presenters that presented today, as well as all of you that participated in today's summit. Again, as you heard from the secretary earlier, we have the infrastructure bill that's occurring. Waiting to see what that will bring as far as projects. Some projects that were on hold may be accelerated. So we are eager to figure that out once we get the go ahead as far as the funding component of that. You also heard from Shante on the Utility Coordination Council as far as how can we better enhance the coordination amongst not only with our internally with our processes and our staff, but also with you all as utility companies as well as consultants as far as assisting to meet those schedules that we have and some of the very demanding schedules that some of those projects entail. But then lastly, you saw about Mark presented about all the projects that are going on, and that was just a snapshot. Like he mentioned, there's other projects, some of the TAP projects, sidewalk projects that were not included. He may have mentioned or spoke to them, to some of them individually, but there's a lot of projects, as you all know, that are coming in. We thank you. We can't thank you enough for your coordination that you've done over the years, but primarily these last couple of years. I know it's been tough for everyone, but we thank you for assisting us. As you see, just driving around, and I don't have to tell you all, you all have been through the blood, sweat, and tears. You see all the construction that's going on right now. So that's part and parcel. Thank you to all of you and your hard work for assisting us in that. So with that, I'm going to conclude our summit today. As Eric mentioned, the presentations will be on the website, on the DRC, I would assume, here shortly. Again, reminders for those that need PDH credit, make sure to fill out the evaluation form. That'll be coming out here soon. But again, thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you all in person next year at our next summit. So thank you all again, and we appreciate your time today. I'll turn it back over to Danny to either you or Todd.
So thank you all. If there's anything additional, please circle back outside of the summit. Feel free to circle back with me if there's any questions or things we need to discuss further. And with that, we're going to end the summit. Thank you.